Our two American saviours were both in their 20s and quite good looking. Randy from Maine was a character, tall, well built and accident prone. He'd just been skiing with a cast on his arm, gained apparently from a previous skiing trip. He didn't seem to care. Mike was from Ohio, had a wicked grin under his brown moustache, and was destined to become Pat's future husband. They were intrigued by our story of Dr. Stanley Bond. Sounds like a first-class pimp to me, said Randy. Yeah, with a stable of high-class call girls, agreed Mike, as we made our way to Stuttgart in his beaten-up Ford van. It was a glorious journey through the Swiss Alps on a beautiful sunny day. The snow was crisp and dazzling white against the blue sky. It was almost blinding, but it seemed to glow with the promise of good things to come. And on this first day of a new year, Pat and I were very excited to be on the road to another adventure with two, hopefully, decent guys. Although they hadn't fought in the Vietnam War, which was still going on in Southeast Asia, as hospital staff, Mike and Randy were often dealing with the post-traumatic stress disorder experienced by soldiers who'd been on the front lines, the so-called grunts. These young soldiers had been shipped to Germany to clean up the drug habit some of them had acquired in Vietnam. It just didn't look good to have drug-addicted soldiers arriving back in the States. At least they weren't in body bags. We had lots of laughs as we travelled through Switzerland, stopping here and there to take photos, to have bathroom breaks and eat. We actually stopped in Zurich and regaled the guys with our au pair stories. They told us more about the hospital where Mike worked in the psychiatric clinic and Randy was a lab technician. They had avoided being sent to Vietnam because of their education and professions, and for the past couple of years had been stationed at the 5th General Army Hospital in Bad Cannstatt, Germany, a few miles north of Stuttgart. They told us there were a lot of civilians from different parts of the world who were working there, and we wouldn't have any problem getting jobs. Also, accommodation was provided, so we'd not only have jobs, but somewhere to live. Yeah. It was getting dark when we finally arrived in Stuttgart. The guys couldn't offer us accommodation in their barracks, since girls naturally were off limits. But we'd already decided to spend the night in a youth hostel and then try and get an interview at the hospital the next day. According to Mike's map, there was a youth hostel not far from the train station. So they dropped us off in front of the hostel, wished us luck, hoped to see us at the hospital, and then continued driving north towards Bad Cannstatt. Standing in front of the youth hostel, something didn't seem quite right. It was all very dark. There were no lights on, the front door was locked, and there was no response when we rang the bell and knocked on the door. It was only 9 o'clock at night, and we thought it should have been open. Then our attention was drawn to a sign on the door in several languages stating that the hostel was closed for Christmas and New Year and wouldn't reopen until January the 4th. Oh dear. We looked up and down the deserted street wondering what to do next. When we were in St. Moritz, we met a really nice guy from South Dakota, Dan, who treated us to Christmas dinner. But it wasn't a traditional meal. We had cheese fondue, followed by chocolate fondue for dessert. It was a real Swiss lunch. The glorious taste and smell of the melted cheese and chocolate will stay with me forever. It was so delicious. And it was the best Christmas dinner I think I've ever had. Dan had done quite a bit of travelling in Europe on the cheap and said that he'd often had to sleep on a bench in the train station. So Pat and I decided that's where we'd have to spend the night. We heaved our packs onto our backs and walked across to the main street where we saw tram tracks. We knew we were close to the train station, but it was probably too far to walk, and which direction should we go? We stood at a tram stop trying to decipher the German language with no success, except I did know the word for train station. A man walked past us and I said, in my basic German, "Wo ist der Bahnhof, bitte?" He pointed to the other side of the road. "Oh, danke," I muttered as we crossed the road and waited for a tram. Within a few minutes, a 3-carriage tram arrived with Bahnhof written on the front. Since we didn't have Deutschmarks, we weren't able to buy a ticket from the driver, and we didn't really want to spend any money. So we hopped on the very last carriage of the tram, far away from the driver, hoping it wasn't going to be a long journey. There were no other people in our carriage except for an older lady, probably in her early 70s. We sat down in front of her, and she looked at us very intensely through her spectacles. Then she approached us, and in English with a German accent said, "Do you have a ticket?" Mike and Randy had warned us to be careful when travelling on the trams. "They're crafty," Mike said. He explained that civilians check tickets and not uniformed conductors, as one might expect. We knew we were in big trouble, but both of us acted dumb. "Tickets? Oh, we need tickets?" The lady, who was tall and quite imperious, with her grey hair swept back into a neat bun, put her hand in her pocket and handed us 2 tickets. "These are for you." Oh, we told her we couldn't pay her, and she said, "Not necessary." Then she said, "Where are you going with those heavy bags?" referring to our backpacks. We told her we were going to the Bahnhof to sleep because the youth hostel was closed. "Nein, nein, nein," she exclaimed. "What would your mothers think?" The tram had now arrived at the train station, and this lady was adamant that we were not going to be spending the night there. "I will find you a place to stay," she said. We got off the train with her, and as she walked ahead of us to a booth in the station that was advertising accommodation, we weren't quite sure what to do. We didn't really have enough money to spend on a hotel, and still weren't sure whether we would be hired at the hospital. Within a few minutes she came back to us. "I have a room for you in a small guest house nearby," she said. "Please to follow me." How much will it cost?" I ventured. "I will pay for you," she said, marching ahead of us with great determination. We were astonished. Here was a stranger, Miss Gertrude Walter, who was willing to help us, and was another angel along our path to the unknown. There's a saying, "Be kind to a stranger," because this might be an angel in disguise. Well, we certainly weren't angels, but Miss Walter definitely was. She checked us into the guest house and promised she'd be there at 9 a.m. sharp the next day to take us for breakfast. A heavy-set and somewhat grumpy man who didn't speak English showed us to our room on the 2nd floor and gave us a key, which he indicated was also for the front door. We dropped our backpacks on the floor of the closet-sized room. "Oh, I could eat a horse," Pat moaned. We'd intended to get something to eat at the Bahnhof, but Miss Walter had sidetracked us, so back we went there in search of food. We wandered into a cafe and couldn't believe our eyes. There was South Dakota Dan sitting at a table having a beer. "Oh my God, Dan!" He was just as surprised to see us. What were the chances of bumping into him in Stuttgart? He had no idea we were going to be there. The last time we saw him was in St. Moritz. It was kismet. He bought us a sandwich and a drink, and we told him that we had a room, so he didn't need to sleep on a bench. we could all bunk in together. Okay, you're probably thinking, ooh, a menage a trois, very sexy. But it wasn't like that. We were just travellers looking out for one another. We smuggled Dan into our room, trying to be as quiet as we could, but couldn't resist giggling as we quickly locked the door. Suddenly, there was a heavy banging on our door, and the grumpy man was yelling for us to open it. We heard words like Mann and Zimmer, which is German for room. Nein, nein, I shouted back. Dan slid under the bed to hide, and we opened the door. Nein, man, here, I said. Unfortunately, Dan was a very tall guy with big feet that poked out from under the bed. Da ist der Mann, Grumpy Man exclaimed triumphantly. Aus, aus, out, out. Dan sheepishly scrambled from under the bed and gathered his things. Later, he said, and we tried to give him eye signals to let him know we'd let him back in later. However, Grumpy German Man read our minds. He put his hand out. Der Schlüssel, he demanded. We had no idea what he meant. Then he showed us a key and mimicked locking a door. He wanted us to hand over our key. Dan shrugged his shoulders as he made his way down the stairs while Grumpy Man closed our door and locked us in. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next time you'll hear about kindness from yet another stranger, and then my introduction to the crazy world of the 5th General Hospital.